Welcome to Learning to Glow, a show about wellness, skin health, and self-development. I'm your host, Jess. I'm a mom, entrepreneur, and skincare expert. I'm so excited to share tips on how to achieve healthy skin and bring amazing guests in the field of health, fitness, aging gracefully, and personal growth. Let's explore all different ways we can take care of ourselves as women, both inside and out, to truly shine. So let's get glowing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode. I can't tell you how excited I am about our guest today. You're in for such a treat. I absolutely loved him. His name is Dr. Rozanski. He's an internationally recognized cardiologist, researcher, and educator. He shares today the 6 domains of health and vitality and breaks down each one with us today, along with actionable tips and examples. I love how his work started in his practice. He was at Cedars-Sinai, and with his patients, he saw firsthand how our stress and our sense of purpose, or our lack of sense of purpose, can affect our physical health and he gets specific about that. For example, he shares how depression can affect our physical health, all the studies that he ran as a researcher, and what we can do about it. This is just such an important topic and message. He is such a joy to speak with. I loved him. Had so much fun chatting with him. And I know there's something in this episode for every single person listening. So I hope you would love it as much as I do and enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show today. We have Dr. Rozanski. I am so excited to have you on our show today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited about the conversation we're about to have. You talk a lot about the mind-body connection, and this is just what our listeners want to hear. So I would love it if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, and then we can go from there.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Long Island, went through a usual public school education, and then I went to medical school, and I was going to be a private practicing doctor and went into cardiology. And at the end of my fellowship, my chief of cardiology said to me, there's this new field that's opened up called nuclear cardiology, and it would do good for you to, get a little training in that area. I think it's going to be an exciting new field. So I took the advice. There was no place to do it in New York where I was training. So I ended up going to Los Angeles, where there was a new program in nuclear cardiology. And for about 2 to 3 years, I was, immersed in that, and I started getting involved in academic work. I hadn't planned to do it. One day, this new research came out, which was showing that people were developing abnormalities in heart function while they were engaged in daily activities. This was a technology called ambulatory electrocardiography, where we look at the EKG during daily life activity. And among people with heart disease, we're not talking about normal people, we were seeing that people were developing some of these abnormalities while they were driving the car, doing housework. And it was occurring without chest pain. We had a name for it called silent ischemia. Ischemia means lack of blood supply to the heart. And we didn't understand it. So I think the good Lord put an idea in my head that we could study this in a laboratory by having patients come in, and besides having them exercise, which we would do, we would put them on a treadmill or a bicycle to see if we'd get a lack of blood supply manifesting as a wall motion abnormality to the heart. I decided, let's see if we can do this during mental stress testing. So we had patients come in, and we had them doing a series of different mental tasks. And one of them was just to ask the patients to speak about the stress in their lives. Well, it turned out that the second patient we did was a man 59 years old about to lose his job. And as he's talking about, his fear about losing his job, we're looking at the wall motion of his heart. And if it's getting enough blood supply, the wall should be contracting in more vigorously. But as he's talking, one of his major walls started to slow down and actually stop moving. And he wasn't having chest pain while this was occurring. This was occurring silently. But this was happening during stress. We saw this same response to different degrees in about 20 of the 40 patients we studied. This work has been reproduced in about 20 studies since. But that was my aha moment. It was like, wow, there's this relationship between the mind and the body. And so one thing led to the next. It led to a sabbatical fellowship from the MacArthur Foundation to study this phenomenon more. And I ended up on different campuses and began being exposed to all of the work that was being done in this new blossoming field. This was back in the 1980s, looking at the relationship between biobehavioral factors and heart disease. So this has been about a 40-year journey looking into all of this.
Oh my gosh. What was your next step after realizing this? And I feel like back in the 80s, that was pretty groundbreaking because people weren't talking about those things back then.
Yeah. So, but for 3 or 4 years, I was just looking at the effects of acute stress on heart function,
Uh-huh.
which in itself was quite interesting. But I couldn't help but notice all the other work that was being done by investigators looking at chronic factors such as depression and anxiety and social isolation and work stress. And there was physiological data coming out showing how these things could impair metabolism, insulin, glucose metabolism, inflammation, brain function. And then the epidemiological studies started coming out showing that people who were depressed or lonely or people under undue stress over a long period of time were actually suffering more heart disease and premature mortality.
Oh my gosh. So, where does, you talk about purpose and purposeful living, like where does this come into play when it comes to the people that you're studying? And I mean, it's like this direct correlation to our physical health. Where did you sort of start to come up with people are lacking this sense of purpose?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, what happened was that for maybe a decade or so, I was just focused on what are the negative things that can damage the heart or impair your health. And we weren't looking at the flip side. What are the positive things that can protect your health? And then I realized, gee, you can use the body as an objective Geiger counter. The body testifies as to what's unhealthy or what's unhealthy. What's healthy are those things that protect the physiology, decrease the risk of disease, and enhance longevity. And what is unhealthy does the opposite. For example, smoking, clearly unhealthy, right? It
Mm-hmm.
causes lung cancer, heart disease, and will cause premature death. So as I began to look at this objectively, I came up with basically 6 domains. I didn't come up with it overnight. It was over 30 years. But basically, what happens is you have these 4 pillars of physical health, whether you're exercising or doing resistance training, whether you're getting healthy sleep, on a good diet, all those things will promote health. But in the cognitive area, we also have factors. For example, people are optimistic, they actually live longer, they have less heart disease. Pessimists, it's on the opposite end of the scale. People who live with a sense of gratitude also live longer. We have objective data that shows this. This is the body testifying as to what's healthy. Then in the emotional domain, people who live longer, if people are healthy, happy, live longer. People are depressed. The body goes haywire with depression. You develop insulin resistance. The amygdala enlarges. The prefrontal cortex shrinks. You develop visceral fat. A lot of things go wrong, and it's a bad thing to be depressed without treatment because it'll be damaging to your body. So that's the emotional domain. Then in the social domain, it turned out that data since the 1970s have shown that people who are lonely and people who have a small or thin social network actually have poor health as well over the long term. So that's a fourth important domain of health. And then the sense of purpose was interesting because people weren't really studying this till about around 2010. It's about 15 years of study, but the data since then has been remarkable. That people have a strong sense of life purpose and have a sense of purposeful living actually have better health and also live longer. So that's your fifth domain. And just to round it out, the sixth is how you manage stress. And there it's an interesting issue because if you're living with a sense of severe stress, toxic stress, if you feel that it's causing a lot of negativity, if it feels overwhelming, if you can't control it, then that actually can damage your health for sure. But when you have a sense of purpose and you have taking on challenges and you're feeling stressed, but in a positive way, like you're moving toward goals, you actually have a greater sense of self-esteem, optimism, and so forth. So that's the flip side of good stress. So those are your 6 domains of health right there.
Yeah. So I want to get deeper into the domains too and what we can do if we're finding ourselves in a situation where you're like, oh my gosh, I want to do something about this because there's clear evidence that if I am going to be in a let's go with like the pessimism thing. Like there are, I'm sure, ways that we can turn that around, hopefully, because that it's just so interesting to know that that can actually lead to you having more chances of prematurely dying just because you're thinking a certain way. That's how powerful the brain is, right? So does this come up a lot in midlife? That's a question before I want to get in deeper into the domains, but does this come up at all different ages with the studies that came out? Is it all different ages that are that you're testing, or does this kind of start in midlife where people are starting to say, okay, well, and do they even put two and two together? Probably not. Like, I'm depressed because I don't have purpose. How do you determine that?
Well, that's a great question. These actual factors cut across the board, across countries, cultures, age groups. But there are different issues in different aspects of life. When you talk about midlife, actually, that is the peak of stress in some ways. If you actually look at data, it shows that people are happiest when they're young and when they're old. If you put an asterisk at old, provided they're still healthy,
Yeah.
because in midlife you have the crush of all of the responsibilities. You have the sandwich between I have to take care of my parents, I have to take care of my children if you're married. It's between trying to establish a career and today keeping up with how do I keep my skills? And who stays in the same job forever? It's changing friendships, maybe moving from one community to another because of your job, or other things like that. So it's midlife is full of a lot of time pressure, more stress in some ways, and when you every decade, every aspect of life has its own challenges. But the data shows that midlife is actually a time when maybe happiness dips if happiness is important to you. I would argue it's not happiness that should be important; it should be your sense of meaning and purpose. With happiness as a side product of pursuing the right things, but actually just feeling more stressed. That's true in midlife.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I'm in midlife and I have that busyness that we all feel. We're juggling so many different things. But then again, like I think back to my 20s, I would not want to go back there either. I was a mess back then. I was stressed there too. It's like there's so many things I don't have to worry about now that I had to in my 20s. But I think that's just a different, everybody has a different experience. But do you think we could talk a little bit about how does this show up? So if you're dealing with the last one we talked about, maybe we're feeling stressed or depressed, like physically, how do these symptoms show up into that? Like, how do they manifest into the physical symptoms in the body?
Well, it depends on the factor you're talking about. Depression is deeply felt by a person. It's part of one of the most difficult things to have that sense of lack of interest in life, of feeling nothing matters. It weighs on you. It's one of the most difficult feelings a person can have. In a sense, we say that depression is lack of movement in life. And actually, the data shows when you take depressed people, actually, and this has been done in randomized studies, when you randomize people with depression to an antidepressant or exercise, they're actually relatively comparable in reducing depression over the short term. So it actually, exercise is now recognized as an adjunct to the treatment of depression. But if you talk about, let's say, a lack of purpose or feeling lonely, that shows up in the body differently. These are like basic psychological needs. And when someone is showing up in the job day in, day out, but they feel I'm spinning my wheels, it's not like alarm bells go off. You're not feeling depressed. You're feeling something's off. There's a sense of I'm not meeting what we call a basic psychological need. And actually, it's termed that way. Our need for meaning, our need to be connected with others, our need for autonomy in terms of being able to choose our direction in life. These are basic psychological needs. And when they're met, they provide a sense of feeling alive and energetic, or what we call vitality. And when they're not met, it's the opposite. You don't have that sense of vitality. You have a sense, life is just a grind, and you might feel a degree of tension, and over time, it may increase negativity or lead to depression if it's unmet for, a matter of, years where you're not meeting your sense of I'm moving forward in my life and I feel fulfilled and I feel like I'm excited by what I'm doing.
Yeah. So next I was thinking, could we talk about the domains like one by one, and maybe you can share what it is, and then maybe some solutions to help us if we're stuck in that one of the domains we're not living optimally, or if there's an area needs help, so that we can work on it, and like maybe some tips of what we can do.
Sure, sure. You want me to run through each one of them one by one?
Sure.
Happy to do
Let's
it.
do. Let's start with. I think the number one. What is physical? Is that
Physical health.
okay?
Yeah. So physical health is built on four pillars: being moving in your life and doing exercise, muscle care or resistance training, getting healthy sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and having a good diet. Now, of all those, where I start with anybody in life generally is, are you moving?
Mm.
Because when we are moving, when we're exercising, it is like the gateway to everything else. Even if I have somebody I'm trying to get on a better diet, often I'm trying to do it sideways by getting them to move more. Because when we are exercising and we feel more fit, we feel better, not just physically, but psychologically. And the thing there is that we now have a lot of data over the last 20, 30 years, ever since we've had accelerometers, where we now have knowledge that when you do any physical activity whatsoever, it is increasing and contributing to your health. They did a study in the UK Biobank. This was a large study in the UK, 70,000 individuals who wore a wrist accelerometer, and they followed them over years. And they found that these short bouts of physical activity, the more you got of them, the better your health was. And by short bouts, we're talking about 1 minute episodes, 2 minute episodes, which means every time I go to the store and I park further away, I'm contributing to my health. Every time I take the stairs instead of the escalator or the elevator, I'm contributing to my health. Every time I walk to the post office, which is maybe 7 minutes away, instead of driving to it, I'm contributing to my health. So you can gamify this. You start with making sure you're getting enough physical activity. And if you are, getting some intense physical activity is incremental in terms of promoting your health. So that's number one. Then if you talk about resistance training, muscle care, well, the muscles, we don't think about it. Again, it's not like calling out to us. If you're living in your daily life, if you're in your midlife as you are, we're so busy and we have so many things to do. There's nothing going off, no alarm bells which says, oh, I got to do some resistance training. Nothing's telling you that you have to do it. But if you look over time, what happens after the age of 30, we're losing about 3 to 8% of our muscle mass per decade. And after age 60, it accelerates. And at age 80, it's going to make a difference whether you're going to be able to play with your grandchildren, pick up a luggage, get off the floor, and so forth. A lot of this decline can be decreased by just doing progressive physical resistance training, maybe a half hour twice a week. And you know what? It makes you feel good when you do it on a regular basis. So that is a second key physical area. Then nutrition, it's, as they say, food is medicine. So if you're eating a proper diet, vegetables, fruits, nuts, a variety of proteins, we can go on and on. I think the general guidelines are there. Again, though, the data shows that about 55 to 60% of the calories we get in our diet are often from highly processed foods. And that's because, we're busy. We don't have time to cook and make the salads the way we want and so forth. So these are life choices we have to make. So, but small changes can make a big difference in that area. And then sleep is an area too where we have to guard our sleep. We have to practice good sleep hygiene, making sure you're going to sleep at a regular time. Getting some morning sunlight is good for setting the circadian rhythm, sleeping in a cool environment, in a dark space, all these things, avoiding, looking at blue light cell phone before you go to sleep. These are the building blocks that we know, but the question is, do we do it? So it's a question of personal commitment to it.
I like what you said about these little small steps too, because I feel like it's more attainable if you can do that. I just recorded a podcast this morning where the woman I was talking to decided that every morning when she was brushing her teeth, she was going to do 30 squats, and just to get something, because she's so busy. She has a young kid and she just wants to get something in. And she's like, I feel I could see a difference. And who would have thought only that tiny little thing? And knowing how important, especially if you were in that depressive state, that the medicine you said is comparable to getting with the exercise. I've heard that so many times. If you can get that exercise in, it can do so much for your brain and your mind and your spirit and all of that. And you can do it. It's like you said, 2 times a week for strength training. Like that's
Yeah.
not a lot.
That is very substantial. The difference between doing nothing and something is enormous. If you take a sedentary person and you can convince that person to do a brisk walk for 10 minutes, 5, 6 days a week, you will actually decrease their mortality risk or the risk for heart disease over the next 10 years by some 20%, which is equivalent to taking someone who has a cholesterol problem and starting them on a statin medication. So it's powerful.
Yeah.
And these small steps, like this example you just gave with the woman and doing some squats while brushing your teeth, or standing on one foot for balance while you're brushing your teeth, or whatever you would do, these small steps can make a big difference. The only thing I'd hasten to say is don't add too many at one time.
Yeah.
This is have I call it the power of the first step. When we take on too much on our plate, then we may not do nothing at all. So value the power of one thing you're doing this week. Have a theme for the year. This week I'll work on this, and when I've mastered this, I'll move to the next step.
That's such good advice. We were talking about that too, of like, if you set yourself up, I have to do 10 things every morning, then you're going to throw your hands up and say, I'll do none of it. And then you're missing out on all the benefits of, just starting in a smaller way. So maybe we could go to number 2.
Sure. So in the cognitive area, one I like to talk about here in terms of mindsets is working on gratitude. I think that is the granddaddy of all mindsets. You want to be happy, you work on sincerely on being more grateful. It is one of the most powerful things you can do. Everybody agrees it's a good thing to do, and everyone mostly provides lip service to it. How do you know you've made it in terms of gratitude? When it becomes part of your mental furniture, when it's in your background, when you can, this morning my son was leaving for work, and I actually had this conversation with him this morning. I said, hey, his name's Jonathan. I said, hey, you can move your hands, right? Do you appreciate that? You appreciate that you don't have a toothache? Do you appreciate that you don't have any leg pains? I went through a bunch of it, and he looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, no, I think you should take me seriously. And he said, I take you seriously. Not yet. But, it's important to say, because what goes onto the heart enough times, it gets absorbed. And he may remember 20 years from now that I was saying that to him. But we have to say it to ourselves. And taking out a few moments a day in any way you may do it, to feel a sense of gratitude is a great place to go. It's also a first cousin of feeling more optimistic. So that's perhaps where I would start in that area.
Yeah, I feel like you can't be grateful for something and pessimistic at the same time. If you're in that state or being conscious about it, it's a feeling that feels so good, and it's hard to have many other negative feelings or any negative feelings at the same time when you're doing that practice. So I love that one.
Okay.
What's the next one?
So if you're talking the emotional area,
okay.
So emotional vitality is actually trying to increase the percentage of positive emotions you have, but also accepting that life has its negative downsides, and we have a kind of a negativity bias built into us. That's just part of human nature, but learning to shorten those and being able to reframe setbacks, which might, get you into a vicious cycle of negativity. So the problem there is very often we're going about our day and we might hear some news, or someone might have said something that really bothered us. And then we start to play it in our mind, and we're not even aware we're doing it because we're not used to catching our negative thoughts. And so if you can't catch your negative thoughts, you have no power in the equation. If you start to learn to catch your negative thoughts, now you have choice in the matter. You could say, I had this thought about this event or this person. Is there perhaps another way to think about it? That's what we call reframing. It's actually the foundation, if you will, of cognitive behavioral therapy, but you don't have to go to a therapist to do it. You just have to slow down enough in life to start to catch some of your negative thoughts, look for a pattern, and say, when I catch myself with this negative thoughts, just to catch it is already, wow, I caught myself in a negative thought. But then you can go to the second point and say, is there a way to reframe it? And then if you do that often enough, you start to find, hey, you get better at this. You can reframe and short circuit negative thoughts, but you don't get there unless you start to learn to catch your thinking. And that takes practice, but it can be very, very helpful if you do that.
Yeah, if you are a person who, and I've talked about this with people in my life that tend to be more on the negative side, right? Like the more pessimistic side. And then also the worst case scenario type of, is that like under the same umbrella? If something's happening, they tend to think they think of the worst thing, not like what good could come of it.
Right. That's a pessimistic explanatory style, taking things personally, feeling it's going to be permanent, not temporary. Optimists, just do the opposite. Things bounce off of them, or they assume if it's a setback, it'll be more temporary. That is a classic definition of optimism versus pessimism. Yes.
And the best thing to do is, like, I guess you're saying step one would be you got to recognize that you're in that pattern and catch the thoughts, because if that's just how you are, you're just thinking this is just life. It doesn't occur to some people that like that's not the only way to think about things, or
Mm.
so being kind of needing to pay attention maybe to what you're thinking so that you can catch those thoughts and be aware, which would be the first step, and then to be able to say, okay, like how else can I look at this and do the reframing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just that it's not emphasized in life.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about it, you're going to go on vacation to Hawaii, Florida, wherever. What's going to determine your vacation more than anything else? The thoughts that you have while you're on that trip. You can be on a beautiful island, but be miserable because in your head you're dealing with rumination or a lot of negative thoughts and so forth. What determines our life more than anything else is the quality of our thinking. But we don't stop to work on it. We work on our job, we work on our career, we work on making more money or whatever. We don't work enough on just these simple things that can improve our mindsets. And what we're talking about is a whole field called metacognition, learning to catch your thinking. And once you can do that, you can begin to work with it. That's why meditation now is a very popular technique, because it helps people slow down. So once you slow down, and then part of meditation is just seeing your thoughts come up, but without judgment,
Yeah.
accepting that thought. I'll tell you, I obviously have had a medical career, an academic career, and have done a lot of public speaking over the years. But in my early years, I was very nervous when I would get up to give a grand rounds talk. And the problem was I wasn't accepting the feeling of being nervous. I was trying to fight it, once I learned, say, oh yeah, I'm going to feel nervous, and that's okay. And
Yeah.
I would just catch the thinking and realize I can just accept it. It made a huge difference. In fact, it made all the difference for me.
Yeah, I love that. I used to do public speaking too with the job that I had. I was a trainer, and it's so true. It's like this is no surprise that I'm nervous. It's fine that I'm nervous. I'm talking in front of 50 people. I can expect to be nervous. It's no surprise here. And then also, it doesn't make me weak or, not good at what I do. It's the same. I had the same epiphanies as you, of where I was like, this is a normal thing to feel like this. And it's because I care and I want to do my best and I want to make sure that it all goes well. So if I was nonchalant and didn't care, I probably wouldn't have been nervous. So kind of reframing that did help, because then instead of being like, oh, what's wrong with me? Why am I nervous? I shouldn't feel nervous. I've done this so many times. I could kind of be like, okay, this is just what I go through. I sweat. I get nervous. It's fine.
Great example. Just perfect.
Thank you. Okay, I'm ready for the next one.
Okay, so then this is a huge area, which
Yeah.
is a need to be for social connectivity, to be connected to others. So there's something here that's interesting because, first of all, we know people who are extroverts and just need to be among other people, and introverts who are happy to be almost alone. So there's a big difference in expression of our social needs, but ultimately, we do feel a need to be connected to other people. As the saying goes, no man is an island, and I think that's true. Some people, maybe it was Jonas Salk who invented the polio vaccine. He worked for many years from morning till night. And I imagine that part of his connection was that I'm helping humanity. That's also another way of feeling connected.
Hmm.
But what happens is that this need, again, is not a need to necessarily all alarms bell go off. And in our society today, you can superficially meet this need through, social connections on social media and text and things like that, which has its place. But ultimately, What happens is that we can sublimate this need even completely during our work years, the time of period you're in now, because we're so busy with our jobs, with our raising of our family, between trying to build new career paths, things like that. And that gives us a sense of fulfillment and actually satisfies another basic need, our need for purpose. But what happens is as people get older and as they reach retirement age, the need to be connected to other people goes up a lot. And what happens, we see an epidemic now of loneliness among other older people. People are living longer now than they used to.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a great blessing of modern medicine and technology. But as you get older, that need to be connected, particularly when my job isn't cutting it for me anymore in terms of being the be all and end all of all things, becomes important. So what happens is if you don't pay attention and you let your social connections, the natural ones, wither over the course of your mid decades, then you find, wait a second, where are those great social connections I used to have? Now you can't pull them off the bookshelf because you let them wither. So that's something we have to pay attention to make sure we have minimum standards in terms of loved ones and people or friends that we want to maintain over the long term, and making sure there's some time that we devote to keeping up those friendships.
Yeah, I know. And I think about this too. A lot of people listening in midlife, and we are in this very busy part of our life. So it's easy to say, I don't have time for that, or I don't have time to meet with that person or have people over at my house. I don't want to clean. That's my big, I don't want to clean. I don't want to cook. And so you do miss out on that because it does take effort. And I feel like when I do make the effort and I see a friend and can have that connection, how good it makes me feel. And like you said, it kind of sets you up for later on, if having friendships is, especially, I think for women too, especially, like we need our female friendships, and we need somebody to see and connect with. And if you don't have that, I feel it when I don't make the effort. So
Yeah,
I know people in my life who are very introverted and don't have the connection that I wish they had. And it makes me worry because I think this isn't good. It's not good for your health. I feel like a lot of what you're saying I'm being reminded of the Blue Zone documentary. I don't know if you saw the Blue Zone documentary about the man who did the study of the people that all lived over 100 in different parts of the world. I think it was like 6 different countries or something.
yeah.
And
I'm very familiar. Yes.
that connection piece was a big part of those studies. And I think it's so important. It's such a good reminder to, we have to make effort sometimes to do that.
Yes, it's the tension of life. This is why life is, when we acknowledge it, we're a step ahead, because we're talking here about time management, which means really priority management. You can't manage time. You can only manage your priorities in time. And what makes it difficult is that we basically have to be jugglers, juggling, our different roles and priorities and whatever. And that is part of life. And that's what makes life difficult. It's more of this, it's less of that. And that accepting that that's a pain in life is important. And then once you do, you can be better with it. And as you get better in managing your priorities, that becomes a more dynamic, healthy, and happy life.
I love that. And also recognizing that there's seasons too. I'm in a busy season. I don't know how long I'm going to be here, but I'm going to be here for a little bit. So I have to make sure that I take notice, like what you said, with my priorities and making sure that I'm getting in what I need to get. And my husband and I talk about this all the time. It's like we have things that we need to do in this home area and our kid area. And, it's like, okay, we need to have a meeting about this and just decide, what are we going to do? Because I also want to have the fun part of life. I want to take the time to do the fun stuff, even if that means the laundry gets pushed back a little bit or something like those.
Yes.
Kind of getting together and being like, what are your priorities? My family has different priorities than me sometimes because I want to go outside and I want to be doing stuff on the weekends, and they are homebodies. Trying to figure that out with yourself, for yourself, and also within your family. That's a different challenge too.
100%.
So what's the next one? Is this our last one? Is this number 6?
No, you have 2 left.
Two left. Okay.
The fifth is our sense of purpose.
Okay.
So there, actually, it's funny because I just wrote a LinkedIn post about this dilemma. What happens is that we're busy with these different priorities we have, but there is something inside on a deep level where you can ask yourself, if my life was coming to an end, what would I regret that I never did? And you could call that a life goal,
Mm.
you know. And what happens is that we're so fixated on what's urgent and what's more immediate, and there's things that we might want to accomplish in the long term. Maybe it's that book you wanted to write. Maybe it's what you're doing, you know, with podcasting. Maybe it's you know, that painting that you wanted to get involved with or whatever, and we just keep putting it off. And the illusion is, well, you know, okay, I'll get to it someday. And the solution is, gee, well, what about if I just clarified what it is that I'm really wanting to do on the deepest level, and just put it on my plate for 10 minutes a week,
Mm.
make it a point of honor, a point of my gift to myself, that for 10 minutes a week, I will, you know, have this endeavor, which I will do. And it keeps it on the plate. It keeps it, you know, instead of the recess in your mind, it starts to work on your mind. And then things can start to happen, you know. One day you committed yourself to writing for 10 minutes a day and a week, just 10 minutes a week. And all of a sudden you had a good spurt for you know, a given day, and then you did more, and then you started to feel, hey, maybe there's more I can do with this. And many great things have happened to many people taking that approach.
I love that because it's such a doable amount of time. And if you're really doing something that is deeply meaningful to you, I'm sure that it starts with 10 minutes, but then I can see you're like, okay, wait, I got to spend more on this because this is making me feel so good inside because I'm
Yes,
finally doing something that's for me that has meaning.
yes, yes,
I love
yes.
that. Okay, so what's the last one?
So the one is just stress management.
Okay.
And we actually kind of covered it before, but you know, I think we've kind of, you know, sold stress as being bad for people, because when you think about it, there's always these new studies coming out. Stress does this, stress does that. I mean, it sells in the newspapers and so forth, talking about the positive sides of stress maybe isn't emphasized as much.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to, and then our relationship to stress, though, becomes very important, because if I'm feeling stress and I'm feeling negative about it, that amplifies the stress. So again, stress, which is something I don't feel I can control, which is toxic in terms of its negativity, which is meaningless sort of stress, that's not good. Or, you know, we have a lot of gratuitous stress in our lives too. Bad time management, you know, spinning our wheels at our jobs and so forth actually becomes a form of stress. But we have to understand that we want to take on goals, and really the point of the positive side of stress management is just clarifying your goals and putting yourself under stress, but in a balanced way to do that. I talk about it sometimes. To achieve what you want to do in life, you have to go out of balance. I call it like the radical build. Sometimes, and I've done this a few times in my life, where I just, you know, I'm committed to exercise and so forth, and I just gave up on sleep, exercise, etc. My family didn't see me, and I was working on at one point, a major medical paper I had an opportunity to put into a major journal. And for 3 months, I did almost nothing else but that.
Mm-hmm.
And it, you know, became a major paper. And the danger with that radical build, though, is that it's can be so tasty. You felt so good about what you accomplished that you forget to get back into life balance. So if you're going to do that, you have to be very careful. You know, that you put a time limit on it. But sometimes to achieve a major goal in life, you do have to give up on that life balance. So that's part of the juggling act too, right? Sometimes you got to go out of balance to be in balance.
I love that though, because it shows you like it's like a sprint. You don't do it forever and you can really accomplish some things. And if you do have big goals, or, you know, a lot of people listening, it could be like a weight loss goal. They want to release weight. And yeah, you might not be able to live the life that you're living now. It might have to change for a little bit, or maybe, you know, always, but you might have to put more effort into something and say no to things that you're used to saying yes to for a little bit if you want to hit that goal. And it could, like you said, it could be stressful, but it could be so worth it too. But you have to
Right,
remember to get back into like, okay, now I need my sleep back. That's
right.
something that's really huge. And we talk about it a lot on the podcast. And I feel like with sleep, you can do so much more. Like when that gets cut, it's tough to like
Yeah, no,
do all the things that you want to do. It's painful
100%,
not to. So
100%.
this was so amazing. Is there anything else you want to share with my audience before you tell us where we can find you?
I would just say, believe in the power of that first step. We've covered a lot here,
Yeah.
but you don't want to make a laundry list. If something touched you today, just do one thing and understand that if you stay with it, consistency is where the magic is. When you stay consistent with something you took on, that's where the growth occurs.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's perfect. This was so amazing. It's so helpful. Please share where we can find you and learn more about you.
Oh, sure. So I have a website. It's under my name,
Okay.
Rozanski.com. I publish a newsletter that people can subscribe to. I'm going to have some new goodies on that. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, so people can find me there or connect with me there. And you can find me both places.
I'm going to link all of this in the show notes. So everybody go check out the doctor. And thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you for having me again. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please subscribe and review so we can reach more people who want to learn to glow alongside us. See you next time.